Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special wintry edition of Hey, Ask Me Stuff. This is probably not what you're used to. It's definitely not what you're used to because I'm not sitting in studio, am I? I'm actually out in the freezing cold, but I couldn't pass up this backdrop. This is so beautiful, isn't it? So obviously, as you can tell, we're not live again this week. It seems like, I don't know if it's just the month of January that seems to be jinxed or if it's Chris Boggs. It's one or the other because for the past 2 weeks, we've been trying to have this show with our worship leader, Chris Boggs, to talk about whether or not there are minimum standards for being on a worship team and worship music in the Christian church. And last week we had a major storm that closed everything down and we had to cancel. And this week, as you can tell, we've had a major storm that closed everything down and we had to cancel. Now, I'd like to say we're going to do it next week, but next week, remember, we've got Pastor Ben Lander is going to be on the show. And so we're aiming for 2 weeks, Mr. Boz. Chris has to check his schedule, and so we'll get back to you. But we're aiming to be back in 2 weeks with that episode. But again, I didn't want to leave without an episode, so we're out here filming an episode for this evening. Welcome, thank you for watching Hey, Ask Me Stuff. If this is your first time watching, let me tell you a little bit about what the show is all about. Well, it's not normally from my back deck in the middle of a snowstorm, or the aftermath of a snowstorm, I should say. We're normally in studio live every Tuesday at 6:30, taking your questions. This is an audience participation, you could say, or audience-driven program where you out there in the internet land get to ask me questions. My name is Ken Coughlan. I'm a Christian apologist with Trinity Lutheran Church and School in Joppa, Maryland. And so if you have a question that you would like to see me answer on a future episode of Hey, Ask Me Stuff, how you do it is you go to this website, trinityjoppa.org/askmestuff. On that website, you will find a form, an online form that you can fill out. And you fill in that form with your question. It can be anything about Jesus, about the Bible, about God, about world religions, about anything else along those lines. And I'll be happy to, we look through every single week. We look through those and we look at all the different questions you've been asked. We pick a different question every week to go to address. I'm going to fix the camera here. I think we got a little bit of a smudge on the camera. Yeah, see, it's fogging up. I might have to do that periodically throughout the episode here. The camera lens. All right, so anyway, so for tonight's episode, actually what inspired this and what I wanted to go into, since I kind of had to think of something last minute, was a question that I've seen come up quite a bit, sometimes in form of just a legitimate question, other times as an objection being lodged against the church. And a lot of people seem to know that, at least here in the United States, churches are tax exempt, right? That we are not required to pay income taxes. And a lot of times, it seems like every single time that there's some major story about someone in the church doing something that someone doesn't like, a lot of the reaction I get from the non-believing community is, why are they tax exempt? Take away their tax exemption. They should not be tax exempt, all of that. Well, and other times people just raise it, like I said, as a legitimate question and say, well, I'm just wondering why that is. Why is it that churches are tax exempt and given that preferred status under our United States government system? Well, for those that don't know, I'm not just a Christian apologist. I'm actually also a lawyer, have been for over 2.5 decades. So this is something that I have kind of a unique perspective on and can actually answer this question. Why are churches tax exempt? And I'm going to defend that churches should be tax exempt. And hopefully by the time we get to this end of this episode, you'll understand why it is that churches are tax exempt and what exactly you'd be giving up in the consequences to our society if we were to remove that tax exemption. Now, the reason I got into this was actually a comment that was on one of our YouTube shorts. It was a YouTube short called God Demands to Be First. It was part of one of Pastor Jay's sermons. And there was this gentleman here at Cozy Chalet posted in response to that short, I understand why people may believe in a cult or religion, but I wish people found a different, more useful, more productive way to socialize. And so I did respond to Cozy Chalet, and I kind of pointed out the obvious. I guess what took me back a little bit was that the comment about a more useful and more productive way to socialize. And I said, you mean more useful or productive than running food pantries, clothing closets, hospitals, homeless shelters, etc.? I mean, you can lodge a lot of complaints about the church. But what you cannot say, at least here, I'm not going to speak for around the world because I'm obviously familiar with the church here in the United States. I don't think you can legitimately say the church is not useful or productive. There are a lot of social advantages, things that the church has brought to our American society that others just generally don't. Well, what got me going today and what made me want to do this episode was this comment. Now, this was not by the original poster. This was by a gentleman named Mike PD6NP, who responded to my comment and said, do you realize more of that happens without religion than with it? That one just like, okay, now I got to do an episode. I did respond to him in the comment section, but this deserves more time because it shows a perpetual belief that's out there a lot. And it's just plain false. It's just plain false. I mean, this one really took me aback, is that there's actually people out there in our society that think more of these charitable type works is being done outside of the church than within the church. And I got news for you folks, that's not true. I've often said a number of times that, look, people are entitled to their own opinions. You're not entitled to your own facts. And if you are a non-believer out there and you are holding to this belief, you think that, that the vast majority of these types of charitable work, these food pantry work, these homeless shelters, things like that, is being done outside of faith-based organizations, you're just wrong. And you're going to have to come to terms with that. You don't have to believe in God. You may not like the church, all right? But you cannot deny the facts that it is providing a number of very good services. And this is kind of tied into the question about why is the church tax exempt? Let me give you one example right off the bat, all right? And this is a very clear example of why churches are tax exempt. A lot of people think that, the government provides food to feed the hungry, all right? And to some extent, that's true. All right, and I'm speaking from experience. My wife actually runs the food ministry here at Trinity Lutheran, one of the larger food ministries, at least in the county. We have a very robust food ministry. We're open 3 days a week. We have a food truck that goes out once a month to bring food to the needy, actually in their community as well. So I'm very familiar with how this operates, and understand that the government food. First of all, what government food there is. All right, the food pantry that we operate, for example, yes, we have federal food that comes in through the Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP is what it's called. And then we also have some state food through a state grant called MEFAP. But that does not provide all of the food that we give out to people. We also have a number of what we call church food, and that can be food that's actually donated by church members, or that's purchased through money that's donated by church members, or that's donated. We have a number of local grocery stores that provide food to us on a regular basis. So this is all food that's unrestricted. The government food all has restrictions on it, right? You have to meet certain financial eligibility requirements, et cetera, et cetera. The church food we can give to whoever we want to. So while the government does provide food, they act as more of a distribution center. Understand this, the government does not operate food pantries, all right? They do not actually hand the food directly over to the people who need the food. They rely on food pantries for that. All right, so the government has these warehouses where they do have volunteers come in and help sort the food and collect the donated food, and they also have some other purchased food that they purchase that you can buy from them. That's the other thing a lot of people don't realize, that a lot of the food from these food banks is also, the churches have to pay for it as well. But then that food then gets delivered to the food pantry, and the food pantry, through its volunteers, actually distributes that food directly to the people in need. Guess who runs the overwhelming majority of food pantries in the United States? Faith-based organizations, churches, specifically the Christian church, all right? And so part of the reason churches are tax exempt is because they are taking a burden upon themselves that would otherwise fall to the government. All right. If the churches did not operate these food pantries, then the government would have to take on that responsibility. And I've got news for you. The government's not doing it on a volunteer basis like the churches are. They're going to have to, first of all, buy facilities for actual distribution centers. All right. They're going to have to pay employees to actually run these things. All right. And they're going to have to pay employee benefits and all that kind of stuff on top of it. Whereas churches already have the facilities. They're using their existing facilities. Or in our case, we actually built a separate building for this. churches get to it on a volunteer basis. We have people from the church, members of the church in the community, that come in and do it for free. Now, we do have one paid employee that runs the food ministry, my wife. Other than that, otherwise, everybody else that handles it is all volunteers. So churches are able to do this at a far lower cost than what the government would be able to do it for. However, the reason churches are able to do it is partially because they don't have to pay income tax. If you make them pay income tax, then that is an additional expense that the church now has to budget for, has to make money for, which has a dual effect. Number one, that's more money that they need to put out that they could otherwise be putting towards these ministries, like this food ministry. And number two, by making them tax exempt, it gives an incentive for people to donate to these ministries. All right. So, whereas if you take that tax exemption away, now all of a sudden people might not be as likely to donate. So, if you take the tax exemption away from churches, you're hitting them on both sides. You're increasing their expenses and you're also decreasing their revenue. And if you do that, guess what the result is going to be? Not as many churches are going to be able to afford to do these food pantries. In which case, the government needs to pick up the slack, and now the government needs to run the food pantries. And guess what that means? More taxes to you. Okay, now your taxes go up because the government needs to create the revenue they need in order to buy these distribution centers or rent the distribution centers and to pay employees and benefits and all of that. So you may not like churches, okay, and you may not like God, you may not believe in Christianity, whatever, that's fine. But there's one thing you should be very grateful for, and that's churches are making it so you pay fewer taxes. All right? That's the short answer for why are churches tax exempt, because they provide services that otherwise would fall to the government. And so the government incentivizes them doing this by making it so they have lower expenses on their end by not having to pay taxes, and they get increased revenue by providing the tax break to those who donate to them. That's why. That's the justification. But getting back to this comment by Mike PD6NP, it's not just the food pantries, all right, that the churches also do. All right, churches, for example, are Christians, I should say, are twice as likely. Sorry, I'm scrolling down my notes here. Twice as likely as a general population to be foster parents. All right, people may not realize that, but you say we need more foster parents. Guess where they're coming from? They're coming from the Christian church at a double the rate as they are coming from the general population. Another one I mentioned was hospitals. A lot of people don't realize this, and it's just ignorance of history. Did you realize that the entire hospital system was created by the church? In the late 18th and early 19th century, the Christian church, out of its responsibility for good stewardship and loving your neighbor and things like that, created a welfare system that evolved into the modern hospital system. You got a little more fuzz on the camera. There we go. That became the modern hospital system. And to this day, right now, 17%. Actually, I should say this statistic was from 2016, so it might be even higher now. As of 2016, 17% of the hospitals in the world to this day are still run by faith-based organizations. And that percentage is actually up. It's gone up by 5% since 1995. So we're seeing the percentage of hospitals that are run by faith-based organizations actually increasing. So the secular world is not taking on more of the burden of the hospitalization. We're actually seeing them taking on less of the burden, and the church is picking up more of the burden. We also have, things like, think of things like Goodwill Industries, okay? If people can't afford to go out and, go to Kohl's and buy new clothing, well, where do they go? They go to secondhand stores, right? Like Goodwill Industries. Well, Goodwill Industries, founded by a Christian minister, all right? What about the Salvation Army? All right, if you didn't know that was a Christian organization, I don't know what to tell you, all right? So we have these organizations that even appeal to low-income folks that also are faith-based organizations. 60% of homeless shelter beds are provided by faith-based organizations. 60%. All right? And even those organizations that aren't faith-based are often supported by faith-based organizations, because you'll have churches that will bring in teams of volunteers to feed people, prepare meals, things like that. All right? And so when you say, and understand the reason churches can do this and have the financial resources to do this is largely because they're given that tax exemption. So it decreases their expenses, which you imply as many illicit motives as you want. The simple truth is the statistics show the church is using these resources to provide services to those in need. That is happening, all right, at a far greater rate than the secular world is doing. Again, you're entitled to your own opinions. You're not entitled to your own facts. So if you were to remove churches' tax exemptions, here's what's going to happen, all right? You're going to lose pretty much your entire end of the distribution center for food to the hungry, all right? The whole process, the whole system in place to actually hand the food over to the people, gone, all right? Which means your taxes are going to go up, all right? 60% of homeless beds, gone, all right? 17% of hospitals, possibly gone, all right? Then things like Goodwill Industries, Salvation Army, all right? All these people just want to get rid of the church. But when people say things like that, or you want to get rid of the tax exemptions, it boggles my mind, because clearly what it shows to me, as not just a Christian, but as an attorney, is you have not thought through the consequences of what you're proposing, all right? So, yes, the church should be tax exempt. Whether you like the church or not, understand that it is benefiting you to have the church be tax exempt, because it is using those funds for all these wonderful other ministries. Now, does the church also use those funds to run Bible studies and to run classes and Sunday school? Yeah, of course they do. All right, because they're still a Christian organization, they're allowed to do that. All right, but overwhelmingly, these services that would otherwise fall to the government are also being performed by the churches, and that is to everybody's benefit and to everybody's advantage. And it is what the church should be doing. And to be honest, if you're a Christian watching this and you're from a church that's not doing as much of that, I would say, well, you should be. All right? And you need to get on that, because it is part of what we should be doing for loving our neighbor, loving our enemy, and having showing good stewardship of the resources that God has given to us. All right? So that is our very short episode of Hey, Ask Me Stuff for this evening. I got to get inside because I'm filming this on my laptop and I can see the snow and condensation building on top of it. And that's not a good recipe for electronics. All right? So we will be back next week, where we will have our special guest, Pastor Ben Lander, reliving our Trinity Talk Live days. We will not be live. It will be pre-recorded again, because he's preaching here at Trinity this Sunday, and we're going to film really quickly afterwards. We are going to be talking about what do you do to kind of get through to people who are prioritizing things over church. And I think the specific context the question was asked in is, let's face it, when I was growing up, your community sporting events did not occur on Sunday mornings. And now they do. And we got an awful lot of parents that are taking their kids to these athletic events on Sunday mornings instead of coming to church. All right? And obviously the question can be broader than that, but that's what we're going to be talking about with Pastor Ben 1 week from today, Tuesday at 6:30, and then hopefully 2 weeks from now, we'll be back live in the studio with worship leader Chris Boggs, talking about whether there are these minimum standards for worship music and for participating in a worship music ministry. All right, so don't forget to go to this website here on the screen, trinityjoppa.org/askmestuff. Submit your question there and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have met our goal. We were trying to reach 2,000 subscribers really we're hoping by June 30th, and we met it like over a week ago. And so we're well ahead of schedule on that. I will be setting a new goal, and we'll be talking about that hopefully maybe next week. I haven't done that yet, and I got to get inside before my computer goes fritzy on me. All right? Thank you all very much for watching. See you next week. God bless.